Welcome to the Road to 100 Million in Real Estate podcast, where you'll benefit from the opportunity to learn to become a skillful real estate investor. You'll get guidance from top industry producers, operators, and investors who are eager to help you learn from their proven strategies of success. Now to your host, Dorrance Constant.
Hey, welcome everyone to another episode. I'm your host, Dorrance Constant. Today, I've got another amazing guest on the show. I've got Matt Fore. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dorrance. Appreciate it.
All right, fantastic. I want to let the folks know a little bit about you, Matt. Matt is a real estate investor based out of Nashville, Tennessee. In his professional career, he spent over a decade in sales and leadership positions at one of the largest tech companies in the world. And after finding real estate, Matt was able to achieve, get this, financial independence in 3 short years by the age of 32. Today, Matt has invested in over 1,000 plus multifamily units, car washes, and various real estate debt. He's participating over $100 million in real estate and investments. And when he's not working, he enjoys reading, training for Ironman triathlons, and convincing his brother that he is the favorite twin.
Boom, got it in there. Thank you.
Matt, again, welcome to the show, brother.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to point this to my twin and see, people in different countries know that I'm the favorite twin still.
There you go. Matt, what an incredible story. You were working a full-time job, and then you transitioned out of your role to be into real estate and gain financial freedom at 32. I know our folks want to hear that story. Could you talk to that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll take you back a couple of years. Like you mentioned, I've spent over a decade in sales and sales leadership at some of the largest technology companies in the world. And part of being in sales means that you get these lumpy commission checks. Well, in 2016, I was part of a huge, large net new acquisition for one of our customers. And I remember when I saw the paycheck that I was supposed to receive, my eyes lit up. It was to the point where I tried to figure out what was I going to do with all this money. And I had friends that said you should dump it into crypto. I had friends that said you should put it in bonds and annuities. And then I had a mentor at the time that said you should look at this real estate thing. Provides cash flow, gives me some tax benefits, you get some appreciation, and it checked all the boxes that I was looking for. Mm-hmm. Well, then came the week of Christmas that year, and I got a call from my VP at the time, and he said I wasn't going to receive that money. I was only going to receive 2 cents on the dollar. And I was like, well, wait a minute. How did we come up with this money? Like, where'd you guys get this number? And he said, Matt, how much money have you made this year? And then I told him, and he said, wasn't that enough? And it was at that point that I knew that I had to take my own financial freedom in my own hands if I wanted to give to the causes I cared about, pursue the passions that I had, and really give abundantly to the world that we live in today. So That's kind of my journey, and we can kind of pick it up from there.
Man, Matt, what a setback. So you've got this check in hand. The numbers there, right? You're looking at this, you're salivating, you're thinking of plans. Even if you're like the average person, you even spent a bit before you got it, right? And then that just gets pulled from you. What a mental setback, right? And a huge deflator. But it sounds like you didn't really just let that get you down, Matt. But what were you thinking post that moment, and how that transitioned to the following steps that you took?
Yeah, certainly it was painful, right? But I want to be clear that I don't really hold a lot of resentment for that. I certainly would have loved that paycheck, but I'm happy with the fact that the people I got to interact with in my career, the skills that I've gotten to learn, the technology that is always evolving and has shaped my view on the world now and how we can use those technology skills. But at the end of the day, it was tough. For me, though, I was already down this path in this rabbit hole of real estate. I'd read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I was on the Bigger Pockets podcast, listened to every single episode. I was in the forums, and I knew that this was the route I was going to take anyways. So I remember it was probably 4 or 5 months right after that I bought my first property. And a lot of people at that time were saying, hey, isn't that risky? What about 2008? You could lose your shirt. What if somebody sues you and all those sorts of things? And I always had to remind them, Dorrance, I'm like, I just got life-changing commission check ripped from my hands due to no fault of my own, playing it safe in the system. Like at the very least, if I go spend $42,000 on a down payment for this townhome, that is cheaper than an MBA, and I will learn more skills than an MBA will ever teach me. So
What a
it's worth
perspective.
my learning to go down this journey and see where it leads.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, that's really one way to look at it, right? Oftentimes when we're trained or maybe the word's not trained, but we're preconditioned, right? To believe that everything within the system is safer than anything that's out of it, right? The system
Yep.
being, an education, you mentioned an MBA, a job. We know, right, that none of that is necessarily guaranteed, right? And in fact, oftentimes being within that system may limit, right, the growth potential that we have.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, first and foremost, the one thing I want to say to listeners out there, if you're looking at getting on this journey of going into real estate, I think it's a good journey to go on. There are some natural risk associated with that, absolutely. But the riskiest thing you can do in your life, I believe, is to tie yourself to one single source of income and
Mm,
one paycheck. And to your point around like not really being meeting our full potential is like as I've gone down this route, I've uncovered passions in myself specifically around finance and how do you structure deals and things like that, that I always knew were there when I was in seventh and eighth grade, but
mm.
never knew how to scratch that itch until I started down this journey, which now, I mean, the world is a canvas. You get to create your own picture on it. And it's just fun seeing the process kind of unfold.
Love that. The world is a canvas and we get to paint our own picture on it. And you were able to discover a lot of, or even probably maximize some of the skill sets that you were using from your role, and apply them to business. Now, I'd love for us to go down that path, right? You mentioned that your first investment. What was that first investment?
Yeah. So the first investment I made was a turnkey property built right around the corner from where I live. So it was a brand new townhome. It had one owner for 8 months. So I knew that the quality was going to be there because I lived in the same townhome community.
Mhm.
I knew it was right around the corner. So I felt like I had eyes and ears on the property. But what I would tell your listeners out there is that you don't have to do a deal that close to you. It obviously made sense for me because I knew the area. But ultimately, Dorrance, the first time I got a fix it call from the tenant, I don't know how to swing a hammer, right? If you saw me swing a hammer, you wouldn't know if I was left handed or right handed. So I didn't know how to fix that. I had to go figure out how I was going to go solve problems. And that's where some of those skill sets that I learned in my W 2 around how do you build a team? How do you lead a team? How do you have some people on your team that offer expertise in the areas where you don't have the expertise and things like that? So that was the first property. Fortunately, there weren't any issues on, there were very few issues on that property, which gave me the confidence to go do my next deal and my next deal and my next deal.
All right, let's talk about some of that transition. It sounds like you started with a townhome, but now you're investing in over $100 million of assets. Help us understand that. What did that transition look like for you to get into those bigger properties? And
Yeah.
also, if you could, what was the mindset that brought you to, I'll say, elevate to those newer, higher echelons?
Yeah, so it was an evolving period, right? So I first bought my property from a realtor. It was on market. It was right around the corner. Then it came to a wholesaler. Then it became to flipping homes. Then it became to like burring properties and things like that. But finally, I woke up at one point and I realized that I had 10 single family homes in my portfolio. And for your astute listeners out there, you know that at that point, you start falling out of Fannie and Freddie's box. Fannie and Freddie don't want to lend you any more money. So I knew I had basically two different options. I could, one, go find other sources of capital. That could be credit unions, that could be local portfolio banks, that could be private money and things like that. Or I could look for different areas of investments. And that's where I found syndications. What took me over the hill, though, in making that move into a passive investment and getting involved in syndications was two things. One, I had a minor flood on one of my properties. And the flood, one of the tenants moved out. They left the faucets running, just dripping a little bit, and it caused some water damage. But that water damage cost me $5,000. I mean,
Mm,
that wiped out the cash flow for the entire year on that property. Now, I had always planned for those things to happen. If you're getting involved in this business, it's not if something will happen, it's when something will happen. So I had my cash reserves set aside and all that kind of stuff. But again, no cash flow for the entire year now on that property. The
right.
second thing, I'll be darned if the next week I had an HVAC go out on one of my units, which
Mm,
again is another $5,000 to $6,000 kick to the shin in your portfolio. So fortunately, again, I had money set aside for that, but that wiped out the cash flow for the entire year. So that's what got me thinking, okay, I already have run into this challenge of finding finance now, or easy finance to get more single family properties. Now I'm running into these issues of what we called in technology a single point of failure. One door, one tenant, one issue goes wrong, property is done. You're done with that property until you can resolve that issue. So that's where I found multifamily and syndications and different things like that. And I remember the first time I invested in a passive investment through multifamilies and a syndication, and wiring $50,000 to someone that you've met only a handful of times is a very, very scary thing. I will definitely put that out there. But I think, Dorrance, for me, it goes back to I had lost way more money than that playing at the safe route. And I knew for a fact that if somebody took my $50,000 and ran off with it, I would figure out what the root of that problem was and never make that mistake again. Going back to the analogy of that's like paying for an MBA. So I was going to learn through this process.
Love that. And that's huge, right, Matt? We're paying for education often, and we're learning from theory. But you made an excellent point. That's an excellent opportunity to invest your money and actually get a return on knowledge, but also a potential return economically, right? So I think that's huge example and inspiration for our listeners. Now, Matt, as you grew into you're growing into different levels, it sounds like you were hitting a place where you were essentially being capped, right, on your growth. And it sounds like at some point you seen the value of maybe going into the bigger deals because there's a huge amount of scale available in that business in real estate. And most of our listeners, if they're working in corporate America, they're working in organizations that have already been scaled and know some of the advantages, but may not be thinking about how that's possible in real estate. Can you talk to those points?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about a 100-unit multifamily apartment complex, that's now 100 different tenants. And usually that means you have 100 different streams of income. So one property going offline for 2 weeks is not going to kill the cash flow on that property. The second scale advantage I see in getting involved in bigger deals is really the operators, the management company on there. So when I had my single family portfolio, I stubbed my toe more than once on some property managers who might not have had the right systems in place. And when an issue came up, they were dealing with it for the first time and things like that. When you're investing in these larger apartment complexes, I mean, the professional managers on site doing this every day are doing it at a high level. So you're upgrading and scaling your management and operation ability. And then the last thing I would say is the tax benefits. So if you look at a single family rental, you're going to get basically 27 and a half years of deductions or depreciation. And most people take that as a straight line. Well, when we get involved in these bigger assets, we can do something called a cost segregation, where we can actually take that 27 and a half on a commercial unit. It's actually 39. But on we can take that 27 and a half and compress it to the first 5 years and essentially get accelerated and scale on our tax benefits as well. So for a number of different reasons, if you have the opportunity to get involved in commercial real estate, it's a better avenue, specifically if you're a passive investor as well.
Absolutely. That makes a ton of sense, right? And frankly, a lot of folks may not even look at real estate as a business per se that can be scaled, but in fact, it actually is, right? You mentioned a point, Matt, which 100%. Is really important. When you're buying one house, it's one stream of income. Whereas when you're buying a multi-family property, 100 plus units, you've got 100 plus, let's say, business units, right, within one company that's producing cash flow. What does that do? That limits our risk as well, right? Because we're diversifying our risk across these 100 plus units. And it's something that's interesting, and I'd love to hear your talking points to this, Matt, is oftentimes, and folks may not think that, even as passive investors, it costs a similar amount of time and energy to invest 100 plus unit that it would even a 50 plus unit. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all you're doing when you're looking at commercial real estate at the multifamily level is moving a decimal point. right? Now you might have to move it a couple spots. It's not just going to move over one spot, but absolutely the time it takes to underwrite a property, look at the lease rolls and rent rolls and things like that is pretty similar to the amount of time it takes from a single family. And again, going to your analogy of scale, and you have a lot more people helping you along the way, property managers, operators, construction workers, and things like that.
And so what, Matt, I'm curious, what you became financially free at 32 years old, which is not common. So I know there are folks who benefit from your experience, your advice. What advice would you give those folks who are want to be, maybe they're in their role, they're working a ton of hours. A lot of my friends are working 60 plus hours in their job. They don't have the time to be active real estate investors, but could potentially benefit from passive. What advice would you give them to help them gain financial independence?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is when I said financially free by the age of 32, that doesn't mean I'm flying first class Air Dubai over to the Middle East and being put up in a penthouse and the royalty is coming out there to greet me, right?
Right.
Financially free to me meant that I no longer had to worry about a roof over my head and food on the table. Now, at the end of the day, I've been able to grow that and accelerate that a little bit further. But when you have those basic needs met in your life, I believe that you show up more intentionally for the things that matter to you, whether that be working on your career, whether that be making sure that you're attentive at your kids' soccer games, whether that be giving back to your community or whatever it is. And it's what I like to call, we think about every time we're having these conversations, we're thinking about ROI, return on investment, return on investment. It is ROI, but it's a return on your intentionality. And one of the things that I made a mistake on early in my career, I think, is going down the single family route. Now, to be clear, it worked for me, right? But ultimately, I was always having to think about what's going to happen on this property. How am I going to secure the debt? Securing the debt is a whole different level of process, right? You got to send over a gigabyte worth of data just to get approved, right? And then I was thinking about the legal risk behind this. If somebody slips and falls and breaks their neck on my property, all of a sudden they're going to come after me and get sued. And whether I win, lose, draw during that lawsuit, that is a huge mental constraint on my life, right? So the thing I would say for your listeners out there that want to get involved in real estate is listen to great podcasts like this and start looking at some of these passive deals, and your returns will be a little bit less than the active, because anytime you put your blood, sweat, and tears into something, you should get paid a higher level. I believe you should get paid at least a 25% return yearly if you're having to put that much effort into it. But start looking at these passive investments. And once you make one, don't think about how am I going to get rich tomorrow? Think about a bill that you can replace in your life with a passive income stream. It could be something as small as a cell phone bill, but a cell phone bill turns into a grocery bill turns into your rent. And all of a sudden you are living a completely different life because your bills are paid for by your passive investments while you still do the things that you care about. Again, could be working a W-2, could be at your kid's soccer game, whatever that is.
I love the way you created that picture, right? As an investor, that person can look at almost like a block. I'm using this passive investing vehicle to replace this thing, then the next thing, then the next thing, then the next thing, until they've also gotten to that point where they can have that financial independence and not have to worry about those basic things to be able to live. That's an incredible illustration, Matt.
I battle with one of my best friends all the time on this, right? Because he's like, $200 a month is not going to change my life dramatically. And I argue with him and I'm like, but that is your car payment. And all of a sudden now, if you've got two of those, that's your wife's car payment too. And you have three of those, that's now all of a sudden you're chipping away into your mortgage payment. And so when you start stacking piece by piece, we all look at the end goal and want to be at the finish line when the gun goes off, but you can't be at the finish line. You have to start at your starting line. So I don't know. That's, you got me a little on a tangent there.
No, that makes no, man, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad your friend has a friend like you. Now, Mike, how do you approach passive investing in real estate? And what are some key considerations you think investors looking to pursue passive investment strategy should have?
Yeah, so it's nothing new. You probably hear this all the time, but there are three different things that I look at in every passive investment. One is the team. The second is the market. The last is the business plan. So first and foremost, you want to look at the team. Have they done a deal together, right? Most businesses in a failure. So you want to know that that team has gone through those challenging times together and can work through those issues. If it's a rehab or a big value add, have they worked with that contractor before? If they're going to have a property manager, have they worked with that property management before? So I want to see that the team has some sort of cohesion and they've worked together in the past. The second one is the market. So we're always looking for where are jobs growing? Where is the population growing? Is income growing along with the population, or is just the population growing? And I pick on Boise way too much than I should. I love Boise people. I don't mean this as disrespect, but a good example is like Boise during the pandemic. What happened to Boise during the pandemic is all the California people picked up and moved from California over to Boise, but there was no real native reason that they were moving there other than they just wanted more space and they had more time and didn't have to go into an office. Now, all of a sudden, everybody's been calling back. What are those people going to do? Well, they probably are going to move back for their jobs because they need income. So there was no native reason that that area was growing. Whereas if you converse that with, I'm going to use my hometown, Nashville. Nashville has got Altstein Bernstein, Michelin, Bridgestone, Nissan, HCA, Amazon is moving 50,000 people here. Like there's native growth reasons why the city is growing. And then the last is really the business plan or the structure. And there's two parts of this. One is the financing and the debt. So is it floating debt? Is there mezz debt on the property? Is there bridge debt? What's the LTV? All those sorts of things. And then the business plan. Is this going to be a lease up strategy? Is it going to be a turnkey? Is it a development? Is it a value add? And again, I'm not here to tell you that one thing of these three things matters the most, or that you should be looking for a specific thing. And if there's that specific thing, you got to check it off as yes or no. But you should understand the context of all of these three things working to make sure that you're making an educated, informed decision.
Oh, that's wonderful advice. Wonderful advice, Matt. And thank you for taking us down that path to give our our listeners a perspective on how you look at some of these. And also, Matt, do you have any approach that you take for risk management of your investments that you could also share with our listeners?
Yeah. So it depends. How's that for an IT answer?
There you go.
It depends. Essentially, because like when I was going down this route initially, I wanted to stack cash flow more than anything, because cash flow is how you pay your bills every single month. So my thesis is not that I should stuff a bunch of money in the ground, pour some water on it, and hope that tree grows like the Wall Street community teaches you. Stick money in your 401k. There will be more than there when you need it, and we can draw off of that. The problem is from now until then, you're still going to need cash flow to live. So what I specifically looked for as I was building out my portfolio was cash flow. Where could I go grab cash flow to pay for my bills, become financially independent? And now I can start taking some more risk on bets. Risk on bets meaning more value add properties that are going to need a lot of work. Maybe a development property that's got nothing coming in for 5 years, but when 5 years hits, I'm going to get this big payout, things like that. So there's where I kind of encourage people to look at where can you get preferred equity or maybe even some debt in your portfolio, because you know it's just going to be consistent stability, cash flow coming in to make sure that you can cover your monthly expenses. Then start looking at the appreciation game and where you can maybe take some risk to get a larger payout at the end.
Awesome. And Matt, how would you recommend that our listeners stay updated on the latest market trends and developments happening in the real estate? Because I know there's a lot of noise going on, right? Rising interest rates, et cetera, et cetera. But where would you point? What direction would you point them in?
So I love podcasts. I love podcasts and I love YouTube. So one of the things about me is, and I'm an Ironman triathlete, which is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, 26.2 mile run. Yes, it's all in a single day. Yes, it's all in a single event. I don't know why I do it either. I'm just a glutton for punishment. But during that time, what I found is this love of listening to things while I'm doing work. So when I would go on my 6-hour bike rides, 5-hour bike rides, go on my 3-hour runs and things like that, would always be listening to podcasts that would help me grow. And maybe I didn't capture all of it during that time. But if you start filling your dead space of your life, when you're vacuuming, when you're doing the dishes, driving your car, going to the gym, in the gym, things like that, with different podcasts and information coming through, then you'll start to be able to picture and piece together different pieces of information to come up with your own idea of what's going on out there. And I would also encourage people to subscribe to things that you purposefully disagree with. You
Mm.
have to listen to what other people say, because whether they're wrong or not, there's a reason why they believe so passionately about it that they would spend their time talking about it. And we can truly never understand the full picture of what's out there in the world until we hear what we believe and what other people believe and be able to understand why they believe that thing.
That's an incredible point that you made. Ray Dalio is a big proponent of that. He would actually put Ray Dalio is for our listeners, a billionaire investor who overcame so much, right? But one of the things that he does is he often, or I should say, always puts someone who opposes what he thinks, so he can get a big picture of it. So that way, he's not caught by blind spots. So that's pretty important as well, right? Getting all perspectives and making a decision, not to be, as we call, as some say, analysis paralysis, but to actually form a thought, a belief system, an investment strategy that can be used to go out and make a decision that's going to, help change your life.
Yeah. So Ray Dalio wrote the book Principles, which I'm mad at because it was so darn good that I can never repeat what he has done. I've always believed in this idea of making principle-based decisions, which means you always look at a decision and say, what is my principal thought here before I make the decision? And when you do that, it speeds up your decision-making process, because some things just are going to be a no and that sort of thing. But anyways, why I bring that up is because he does a good job of looking at the decisions he made in the past and understanding why they failed. And when you're listening to somebody that you disagree with, it's important that you meet them where they are. And what I mean by that is, don't listen to what they're saying as much as try to understand why they are saying that. Because when you understand why they are saying that, then you start understanding their principles, and you can create those differences between your principles and their principles to see if there's some flaws in yours or some goodness in theirs.
Wonderful. Now we're getting low on time. Matt, if you could wave a magic wand, go back in time and make some different changes in your business, what would they be?
I hate to say, I don't know if I would. Right. So let me be clear. I made tons of mistakes in my life, in my business, and everything like that. I was having this conversation with one of my partners the other day, and they picked on something that took me so long to pick up on almost instantaneously. And it kind of frustrated me. So when I'm hearing this question, I'm like, oh, I had shortened those 3 years. But we are where we are because of the journey we've taken in our lives and some of the setbacks that we've had and some of the growth opportunities that we've missed. So I don't know if there's many things that I don't think about the things that I regret from that standpoint, because I am where I am because I'm supposed to be here, and I'm going to be where I'm going to be because of the mistakes I made. So I'm not sure there's many things that I would change. Now, if you're out there listening to this and that seems like a BS answer that I sidesteps the question, well, let me just say this. I wish I would have started sooner, right? I had to have a painful moment in my life to make me recognize that I was going down a non-safe route that was pitched to me as the safest thing that I could do. I wish when I was 7th grade reading that book on the stock market and finding that I had this passion, that I would have followed that passion a little bit further. I wish that if I were listening to those podcasts in 2016 about why I should jump into passive investing and larger assets and things like that, that I would have followed that rabbit trail, because that's ultimately where I ended up. So I guess that's the only thing I would say to your listeners out there is start where you are, but get involved as soon as possible so that you can start learning, because action is where you learn, not listening, not reading, not doing all those other non-involved activities.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got to have those actions that produce some form of change, some form of improvement in our lives, instead of just thinking about it, right?
Right.
Just
Right.
thinking about those things, but actually taking those actions. I live by this, what the steps I take today is what changes my tomorrow. So going out there
Absolutely.
and taking action is what's key to the success, key to what we dream about, key to solving the problems that we have is taking those steps. Now, Matt, what's something that you're working on that you believe our audience should know about?
So I think we were chatting about this before the show. So I've started off as an active investor, moved to a passive investor, and now I'm back on the active side, putting together deals around multiple different asset classes for commercial real estate. And one of the things I'm working on right now is really understanding the investor experience through our process and trying to figure out how we automate to supplement what we do. So things like you fill out a form that you want to soft commit for one of our investments. How do we make sure that you understand we received that? Here's what our notes show. Here are the next steps and things like that. So as we enter into this new world of AI, chat GPT, and automation, it's kind of cool to just learn those skills and to see things play out and things like that. So I don't know, we can nerd out about that if you want to, but that's kind of what I'm working on now is improving our investor experience through some help from automation tools and things like that.
Yeah, well, man, Matt, right now, what's happening in AI and what's about to happen in AI is just mind blowing.
Yeah, I say this all the time, and it's a good quote to always keep in mind. We are moving faster right now than the world has ever moved, but we are moving slower than it ever will be. So if you are lost right now in how fast things are moving, buckle your seatbelt because things are going to move a lot faster. So I think it's important. Why I'm bringing this up is because I was never like a techie person. I was involved in sales of technology. I was not a very techie person. But what I've learned at my age of 36 now is that, boy, I better jump in feet first to a lot of this stuff because in 20 years, the world will pass me by so fast if I don't have a rudimentary understanding of what some of the tools that are coming out there today are.
Absolutely. Now, Matt, you've dropped a lot of gems. I know our folks are going to want to connect with you, going to want to reach out. Would you please share what are some of the best ways our folks can connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to connect with me is you can email me at matt@nextlevelincome.com. That's all one word. And we'll drop that in the show notes. Or you can come listen to my podcast as well called Ice Cream with Investors. So I started this show a couple years ago just to really learn from other people about all the different niches in real estate. And what I thought was just the fix and flip that you see on HGTV is so much more than that. So we have people talking about parking lots. We got people talking about debt. We got people talking about multifamily, self-storage, car wash, fix and flips, everything throughout the real estate spectrum. So it's been a fun little journey to just learn from those people as well.
Awesome, everyone. Make sure you go out and reach out to Matt. That's also part of the action taking. If you're in this journey, whether you're investing in real estate, looking to invest in real estate, actually reaching out to folks who are opening their doors to be spoken to. Matt, thanks for making yourself available to our listeners. Well, we've run out of time, Matt, but you've dropped some amazing gems on the podcast today. I definitely really appreciate your time and what you brought to the show. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We trust that you enjoyed today's show. Visit archcapital.ventures to learn more about how you can leverage real estate investing to improve your life through passive income, financial freedom, and generational wealth.